Ambassador Sarah Chen stepped off the transport ship and onto the polished crystal floor of the Velkari throne world. The air smelled different here, processed through systems that had cleaned the atmosphere of 847 planets for over 12,000 years. Everything around her gleamed with the confidence of an empire that had never known defeat. She walked slowly, her diplomatic team following behind her. They were the first humans to ever stand in this place. Earth had only discovered faster-than-light travel 30 years ago. To the galaxy, humanity was new, primitive, and largely irrelevant. Most species barely acknowledged their existence. The throne room stretched ahead like a cathedral. Tall pillars reached toward a ceiling so high it disappeared into artificial clouds. Thousands of alien dignitaries lined the walls, representatives from hundreds of worlds. They watched the human delegation with barely concealed amusement. Some whispered to each other. Others simply stared. At the far end of the massive hall sat Emperor Thaxuel XVI. He was enormous, nearly 3 meters tall, with thick armor-like skin that shimmered between blue and purple. His forearms rested on the armrests of a throne carved from a single piece of black stone. On his primary right hand, he held a ceremonial scepter that glowed with a soft golden light. Sarah had studied everything available about Velkari culture. She knew the Emperor ruled absolutely. She knew his word was law across 847 worlds. She knew that his empire had crushed dozens of civilizations and absorbed hundreds more. She also knew that humanity needed to establish itself as an equal partner, not a subject state. The walk to the throne took 10 minutes. Every step echoed in the silent hall. Sarah kept her back straight and her face calm. She had been a diplomat for 20 years. She had negotiated peace treaties in war zones, trade agreements in hostile territories, and first contact protocols with 3 different alien species. But nothing compared to this moment. When she reached the designated position 50 meters from the throne, she stopped. The protocol officer, a thin creature with too many joints in its arms, gestured for her to kneel. Sarah remained standing. A ripple of shock moved through the assembled dignitaries. The protocol officer gestured again, more insistently. Sarah looked directly at the Emperor and bowed her head slightly, a gesture of respect between equals. She did not kneel. Emperor Thaxuel XVI leaned forward slightly. His voice, when he spoke, rumbled through the hall like thunder. Translator implants converted his words into dozens of languages simultaneously. "The human representative does not know proper respect," he said. It was not a question. Sarah met his gaze. "The human representative offers respect as one sovereign power to another, Your Imperial Majesty. Humanity seeks partnership with the Velkari Empire, not subjugation." The silence that followed was absolute. No one spoke to the Emperor this way. No species denied the hierarchy that had existed for millennia. The strong ruled, the weak served. This was the natural order of the galaxy. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "Partnership? Your species controls 3 worlds. We control 847. Your oldest colony is 28 years old. Our youngest subject world has paid tribute for 3 centuries. You have 200 military vessels. We have 50,000. You speak of partnership?" Sarah had prepared for this. She knew the numbers were against humanity. She knew that by every measurable standard, humans were insignificant. But she also knew that agreeing to become a tributary state would set a precedent that would define humanity's future for generations. "We speak of potential, Your Imperial Majesty," she said carefully. "Humanity may be young, but we are innovative, adaptable, and determined. We offer knowledge exchange, cultural trade, and mutual defense agreements. We can contribute to the Empire as partners, not subjects. Everything you have to offer we can simply take," the Emperor said flatly. "This is how the galaxy has always functioned. The strong command, the weak obey. We are offering you the privilege of peaceful integration into our empire. Your worlds will be protected. Your people will have access to galactic trade routes. In exchange, you will provide tribute, resources, and acknowledge Velkari supremacy." Sarah's diplomatic team shifted nervously behind her. She could feel their tension. The offer was not unreasonable by galactic standards. Many species had prospered under Velkari rule, but it would mean giving up human independence before they had truly achieved it. "Humanity must respectfully decline, Your Imperial Majesty," Sarah said. "We prefer to chart our own course." The Emperor sat back in his throne. His forearms tensed. Around the hall, the alien dignitaries began whispering urgently. Several moved toward the exits. "You decline," the Emperor repeated slowly. No species has declined our offer in 4,000 years. The last one that did no longer exists. We mean no disrespect, Sarah continued, keeping her voice steady despite the fear rising in her chest. We simply ask to be recognized as a sovereign civilization, with the right to determine our own future. Surely the great Velkari Empire, which has shown wisdom for 12,000 years, can accommodate one more independent voice in galactic affairs. The Emperor stood. His full height was terrifying. The scepter in his hand pulsed with brighter light. Sarah's security team immediately moved forward, but she held up a hand to stop them. You mistake our generosity for weakness, the Emperor said, his voice now cold. You mistake our patience for acceptance of your insolence. We have built this empire through strength and order. We have maintained it through absolute authority. We do not debate with primitives who have barely learned to leave their home system. We are not primitives, Your Imperial Majesty, Sarah said firmly. We are human, and we will not be subjects. The Emperor raised his scepter. The golden glow intensified, becoming painful to look at. Sarah saw the weapon for what it was a split second before it activated. Then you are nothing, the Emperor said. The plasma discharge was instantaneous. Sarah Chen, Ambassador of Earth, representative of 3 billion humans across 3 worlds, experienced Diplomat and mother of 2, ceased to exist. Her body vaporized, her atoms scattered. Her existence ended in less time than it took for her heart to beat once more. Her security team reached for weapons they were not carrying, per diplomatic protocol. The Velkari guards cut them down with energy weapons before they could take 3 steps. The rest of her delegation stood frozen in horror. Emperor Thaxul XVII sat back down on his throne. He gestured dismissively at the scorch marks on his perfect crystal floor. Let this serve as a lesson to all who witness, he announced to the assembled dignitaries. The Velkari Empire does not negotiate with those who refuse their natural place in the order of things. This meeting is concluded. The human delegation may return to their worlds and inform their leaders that the Empire will arrive within the month to establish proper tribute arrangements. If they resist, they will share their ambassador's fate. The surviving human diplomats were escorted out. Around the throne room, the alien dignitaries nodded in approval or remained carefully neutral. This was normal. This was expected. Upstart species learned their place or learned nothing at all. Within hours, the news spread across the galaxy. The human ambassador had been executed for insolence. The Empire would absorb humanity within weeks. It was barely noteworthy. Such events had occurred hundreds of times throughout history. But no one in that throne room, not the Emperor, not the dignitaries, not even the terrified human survivors, understood what they had actually witnessed. They had not seen a lesson in galactic hierarchy. They had seen the moment humanity's restraint ended. They had seen the spark that would burn an empire to ash. They just did not know it yet. The news reached Earth 17 hours after Ambassador Chen's death. The message transmission traveled through the relay network that connected human space to the wider galaxy. It was marked urgent, encrypted with the highest security protocols and addressed to the United Earth Coalition. Director James Morrison received the message in his office in Geneva. He was drinking coffee and reviewing agricultural reports from the Mars colonies when his communications officer entered without knocking. The woman's face was pale. "Sir, we have an emergency transmission from the Velkari delegation," she said quietly. "Ambassador Chen is dead. They murdered her." Morrison's coffee cup fell from his hand. It shattered on the floor, but he did not notice. He stared at his officer, waiting for her to say she was mistaken, that this was some kind of terrible joke. She simply handed him a tablet with the full report. He read it 3 times. Each time the words remained the same. Ambassador Sarah Chen, executed by the Velkari Emperor during formal negotiations. Her security team, killed trying to protect her. The Empire demanding Earth submission within 30 days. The alternative was total war against a force that controlled 847 worlds. Morrison activated the Emergency Council protocols. Within 2 hours, every leader of every human government was connected through secure channels. Earth's president, Mars's colonial governor, the Proxima Administration Council, and military commanders from every branch of humanity's armed forces. They watched the recording that the surviving delegation had managed to transmit. They watched Sarah Chen stand firm, refuse to kneel and advocate for human independence. They watched the Emperor raise his scepter. They watched their ambassador die. The council chambers were silent when the recording ended. Then everyone started speaking at once. Some called for immediate retaliation. Others urged caution against an empire that could destroy humanity with a fraction of its military power. A few suggested negotiation, perhaps accepting tributary status to avoid extinction. General Patricia Okonkwo of the United Earth Defense Force stood up. She was 60 years old, a veteran of the colony wars that had nearly torn humanity apart during the early years of expansion. Her voice cut through the chaos. "Everyone shut up and listen," she said. "We need to be clear about what just happened. They killed our ambassador during a diplomatic mission. They killed her for refusing to surrender our freedom. This is not a negotiation anymore. This is a test. If we back down now, humanity will never be free. We will be subjects forever or we will be dead." President Amanda Reeves of Earth spoke next. "General, we have 200 combat-capable ships. They have 50,000. Our entire military budget for a year is less than what they spend maintaining one sector fleet. How do we fight an empire that has existed for 12,000 years? We fight smart," Okonkwo replied. "We fight dirty. We fight like our survival depends on it because it does. We use every advantage we have." "What advantages?" asked Governor Chen of Mars, no relation to the ambassador. "They surpass us in every measurable way." Okonkwo smiled, but there was no humor in it. "They surpass us in resources, yes. In ships, in territory, and experience with traditional warfare. But they do not know how humans fight. They have never faced an enemy that will do anything, sacrifice anything to win. The galaxy fights by rules. Humanity wrote different rules." The debate continued for 6 hours. In the end, the vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Humanity would not submit. They would make one demand, and if that demand was refused, they would go to war. The message was drafted carefully. It was brief, clear, and direct. The United Earth Coalition demanded that Emperor Thaxul XVII surrender himself for trial by an impartial galactic court for the murder of Ambassador Chen. If he refused, humanity would consider itself at war with the Velkari Empire. When other species received this message through the galactic network, they thought it was a joke. Some laughed openly. Others sent sympathetic messages to Earth, expressing condolences for their impending extinction. Military analysts across a dozen species ran simulations. Every single one concluded that humanity would be completely destroyed within 3 months. The Velkari Empire did not even bother to respond officially. Instead, Emperor Thaxul XVII gave an interview to a major galactic news network. He sat on his throne, relaxed and confident. "The humans amuse me," he said. "They demand I surrender? They threaten war with what? Their toy ships? Their 3 little worlds? I could crush them with the security fleet that patrols my capital system. But I am generous. I will send a proper fleet, 500 ships to teach them respect. When they see real military power, they will beg for the mercy of becoming our subjects." The interview was broadcast across the galaxy. Most species agreed with the Emperor's assessment. A few more thoughtful observers noticed something else. They noticed that the humans had not responded to the Emperor's mockery. They were not making threats or sending diplomatic protests. They were simply preparing. Every human ship was recalled to military service. Civilian vessels were retrofitted with weapon systems. Factories shifted to wartime production. The colony wars had ended only 15 years ago, and the infrastructure for total war still existed. Humanity began activating it. General Okonkwo took command of the combined human defense forces. She established headquarters on Proxima Station, the outermost human military installation. She knew the Velkari fleet would come there first. It was the obvious target, the gateway to human space. She had 200 ships, most of them small frigates and destroyers. Against 500 Velkari capital ships, each 3 times larger and more heavily armed, it seemed hopeless. But Okonkwo had fought hopeless battles before. She had held Martian positions against overwhelming odds during the colony wars. She had learned that desperation made humans dangerous. "They expect us to fight like them," she told her officers during the final briefing. "They expect formal battle lines, honor duels between capital ships, surrender negotiations when defeat seems certain. We are not going to give them that. We are going to fight like cornered animals because that is exactly what we are." The Velkari punitive fleet arrived at Proxima Station 3 weeks after Ambassador Chen's death. 500 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Their commander, Admiral Kresh, broadcast a demand for immediate surrender on all frequencies. Okonkwo's response was to launch every ship she had directly at the enemy fleet. The Velkhari were confused. This was not standard tactics. Ships were supposed to maintain formation, exchange fire at range, and maneuver carefully. The humans were not doing that. They were charging forward at maximum speed, firing everything and showing no interest in survival. Human ships rammed Velkhari vessels, detonating their reactors at point-blank range. Human fighters flew suicide runs into enemy bridges. Human destroyers pretended to retreat, then reversed suddenly and launched missiles at pursuing ships. Every human vessel fought as though death was preferable to surrender. The battle lasted 14 hours. By the end, only 17 human ships remained operational. But 187 Velkhari ships were destroyed or disabled. The remainder retreated, carrying reports of an enemy that fought like demons, that used tactics no civilized species would employ, that valued victory over survival. Admiral Kresh sent a message to the imperial capital. The humans were more dangerous than anticipated. He requested reinforcements. Emperor Thaxul XVII, humiliated by the loss of nearly half his punitive fleet, ordered a full battle group to human space. 5,000 ships, 10% of the entire imperial navy. This force had toppled civilizations. This force had conquered dozens of species. This force would surely be enough. On Earth, in Mars, in Proxima, humanity mourned their dead and prepared for the next battle. They had proven they could hurt the Empire. Now they had to prove they could survive it. General Okonkwo stood on the bridge of her new flagship, looking at the casualty reports. Over 15,000 humans had died at Proxima Station. She thought about Ambassador Chen, about her 2 children who would grow up without their mother. She thought about all the deaths to come. They wanted to teach us our place, she said quietly to her second-in-command. Instead, they are going to learn what happens when you back humans into a corner. The second wave was coming, and humanity was ready. The Velkhari battle group assembled at the edge of Imperial space was the largest military force deployed in over 2 centuries. 5,000 warships ranging from massive dreadnoughts to fast attack cruisers formed a formation that stretched across thousands of kilometers. Fleet Admiral Vorn commanded from the super dreadnought Eternal Glory, a vessel so large it had its own internal city. Vorn was old by Velkhari standards, over 300 years. He had fought in the subjugation wars, the border conflicts, and the rebellion suppressions. He had never lost a campaign. The Emperor had chosen him personally for this task, with explicit instructions that humanity was to be made an example. We will not simply defeat them, the Emperor had told Vorn. We will erase any thought of resistance. When we are finished, the humans will beg to serve us or they will cease to exist. The fleet jumped to human space in 3 waves to avoid detection. It took them 4 days to reach the outer colonies. They expected heavy defenses, minefields, fortress stations. Instead, they found scattered patrol ships that immediately retreated toward Earth. Vorn smiled. The humans were running, but General Okonkwo was not running. She was setting a trap. While the Velkhari fleet had been assembling, humanity had been working around the clock. Every civilian factory was now producing weapons. Every transport ship was being retrofitted. Every resource was being redirected toward one goal, survival. But they could not match the Velkhari in production or firepower. They had to be smarter. Okonkwo had studied every recorded battle involving the Velkhari Empire. She noticed patterns. They always fought the same way: formal formations, predictable tactics, reliance on superior firepower. They had never needed to innovate because they always won through sheer force. That was their weakness. They think war is about who has the bigger fleet, she told her staff. They have never fought an enemy willing to lose everything to win. As the Velkhari fleet pushed deeper into human territory, they started encountering problems. Communication relays were destroyed. Navigation beacons were giving false readings. Supply convoys were ambushed by small human strike teams that appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. Nothing was crippling, but it was annoying. Admiral Vorn ignored these pinpricks. He focused on the primary objective, which is Earth. Once he controlled humanity's homeworld, resistance would collapse. He pushed his fleet forward at maximum speed, leaving behind garrison forces to secure captured territory. The human ships continued their fighting retreat, always staying just out of range, occasionally stopping to exchange fire before fleeing again. Vorn interpreted this as cowardice. His officers agreed. The humans knew they could not win, so they were buying time before inevitable surrender. They were wrong. Humanity was leading the Velkhari fleet exactly where they wanted it. Into the Sol system. Into Earth's home territory where every piece of infrastructure had been weaponized. The moon housed massive railgun batteries. Mars had orbital defense platforms. The asteroid belt had been seeded with mines disguised as debris. Earth itself was surrounded by layers of defense satellites, automated weapon systems, and desperate humans willing to die to protect their home. When the Velkhari fleet entered the Sol system, they saw Earth ahead, a blue jewel in the darkness. They saw scattered human ships retreating toward the planet. Admiral Vorn ordered his fleet to pursue and destroy them. Then the trap closed. The moon opened fire first. 50 railgun batteries launched solid projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. The Velkhari shields were designed to stop energy weapons and conventional missiles. They were not designed to stop 100-ton tungsten rods moving at relativistic velocities. 3 dreadnoughts were crippled in the first salvo. The human fleet reversed course and charged directly at the confused Velkhari formation. Behind them, the asteroid belt came alive. Thousands of mines activated, propelling themselves toward the enemy fleet. Most were destroyed by point defense, but dozens found their targets. Mars launched waves of autonomous attack drones. They swarmed over Velkhari ships, latching onto hulls and detonating. Each drone was small, barely a threat individually, but there were hundreds of thousands of them. Admiral Vorn tried to reform his fleet, to create proper defensive lines, but the humans were not fighting a conventional battle. Human ships were everywhere, attacking from every angle using the debris and chaos as cover. They targeted engines, bridges, communication arrays. They were not trying to destroy ships outright. They were trying to disable and disorganize. A group of human freighters, civilian vessels hastily armed, accelerated toward the Velkhari flagship. Vorn's officers laughed at the audacity. The freighters would be destroyed long before they reached the eternal glory. They were right. The freighters were destroyed, but their cargo, thousands of tons of explosives and shrapnel, continued forward on ballistic trajectories, shredding the shields and hull of 3 nearby cruisers. The battle raged for 36 hours. The Velkhari fleet, despite its overwhelming numbers, could not adapt to human tactics. They were designed to fight other conventional militaries, not an enemy that weaponized everything and sacrificed freely for small advantages. Human losses were catastrophic. 60% of the military fleet was destroyed. 40,000 soldiers and crew died. Mars took damage from misfired weapons and collisions. The moon's railgun batteries were half destroyed by Velkhari return fire. Earth's orbital infrastructure was in ruins, but the Velkhari lost more. When Admiral Vorn finally ordered a retreat, only 2,000 of his 5,000 ships remained combat-capable. The Eternal Glory itself was listing, its engines damaged, its shields failing. The Imperial Navy had just suffered its worst defeat in 4,000 years. The galaxy watched in shock. The recordings of the battle spread through every news network, every military academy, every diplomatic channel. Species that had been subjects of the Velkhari Empire for centuries saw something impossible. The invincible had been defeated. On Earth, the victory celebrations were muted. Too many had died. Every family knew someone who would not return. General Okonkwo stood in the ruined operations center and looked at the casualty lists. Over 70,000 humans dead, billions in infrastructure destroyed, and this was only the beginning. They still have 45,000 ships, her second-in-command said quietly. We barely survived 5,000. What happens when they send everything? Okonkwo had already considered this. She knew the Empire would respond with overwhelming force. She knew Earth might not survive the next attack. But that did not matter anymore. Humanity had already won something more important than military victory. Send a message to every human colony, every ship, every outpost, she ordered. Tell them what we accomplished here. Tell them that we made the Empire bleed. Tell them that Ambassador Chen has been avenged, but we are not done yet. What else are we going to do? Her officer asked. We have maybe 40 ships left that can fight. We are out of missiles, out of railgun ammunition, out of drones. We held them off once, but we cannot do it again. Okonkwo turned away from the casualty reports. She brought up a different file, one marked with the highest security classification. Inside were plans that had been developed in secret, operations that violated every galactic convention. Tactics that would horrify civilized species. "We are not going to wait for them to come back," she said. "We are going to take this war to them. If they want to fight humans, they are going to learn what total war really means." Across human space, special forces teams were already preparing. They had been training since the day Ambassador Chen died. They had been studying Velkari infrastructure, Velkari security, Velkari weaknesses. They knew they could not defeat the Empire in a conventional war. So they were going to fight an unconventional one, and they were going to start with the Emperor himself. Commander Marcus Webb had been a special forces operator for 15 years. He had fought in the colony wars, conducted covert operations on hostile stations, and trained in every combat scenario humanity had developed. But nothing had prepared him for the mission he was about to undertake. He stood in the briefing room of a classified facility hidden in the asteroid belt. Around him sat 11 other operators, the best humanity had. They were mechanics, pilots, communications experts, and killers. They were also volunteers because the mission had a survival probability of less than 5%. "The objective is simple," General Okonkwo said, displaying a holographic image of the Velkari throne world. "We are going to kill the Emperor." The room remained silent. They had expected something dangerous, but this was beyond anything they had imagined. The throne world was the most heavily defended location in the galaxy. Thousands of ships patrolled the system. Orbital platforms bristled with weapons. The Imperial Palace itself was a fortress that had never been breached in 12,000 years. "Impossible is not a reason to refuse," Webb said calmly. "But we need to know how we are supposed to reach him." Okonkwo smiled grimly. "The Empire is mobilizing for total war against us. Every available ship is being recalled to Imperial space. That includes the transport vessels that carry subject species to work in Imperial factories and facilities. These transports are inspected, but not thoroughly. They carry too many species, too many individuals. The security forces cannot check everyone." She brought up another image showing identification documents, work permits, and travel authorization. "You will enter the Velkari Empire as refugee workers from the Kresh species. They look similar enough to humans after some prosthetic modification. You will be processed, assigned to work details, and eventually transferred to the capital system. From there, you will have to improvise. Improvise our way into the Imperial Palace," one of the other operators said flatly. "That is the plan." "That is your insertion plan," Okonkwo corrected. "Once you are on the throne world, you will receive support from resistance groups within subject species. Not everyone loves the Empire. Many have been waiting for an opportunity like this." Webb studied the information carefully. It was insane. It would probably fail. But it was also the only chance humanity had. The Empire was gathering its full might. When they returned to human space, they would bring enough force to sterilize every human world, unless humanity struck first where it hurt most. "When do we leave?" Webb asked. 6 hours, Okonkwo replied. "The next refugee transport departs from Proxima Station. We control it now. Your team will be inserted into the cargo hold with proper documentation. After that, you are on your own." The operation began with a month of tedious travel. The refugee transport moved slowly through Imperial space, stopping at processing centers, work assignment stations, and security checkpoints. Webb and his team maintained their cover identities perfectly. They learned to move like Kresh workers, to speak their language, to adopt their mannerisms. The prosthetics were uncomfortable. The constant fear of discovery was exhausting. But they persisted. They were transferred 3 times, each time getting closer to the throne world. They worked in factories, cleaned ships, and gradually built a network of contacts among other subject species. Many aliens were shocked to discover humans moving freely in Imperial space. Some refused to help. Others, particularly those whose species had been brutally subjugated, offered quiet assistance. Webb learned that the Empire was not as unified as it appeared. Resentment simmered beneath the surface. The humans were just the first to openly resist. After 6 weeks of careful movement and planning, Webb's team reached the throne world. They were assigned to maintenance work in the lower levels of the Imperial Palace complex. It was menial labor beneath the notice of Velkari security forces. Perfect. While Webb's team prepared their primary mission, humanity launched its secondary operations. Small strike teams inserted throughout Imperial space began targeting infrastructure. They destroyed communication relays, sabotaged fuel depots, and attacked supply convoys. They avoided military targets, which were too well defended. Instead, they struck at the logistics that kept the Empire functioning. The Velkhari military was confused. They were designed to fight conventional wars, not insurgencies. Their security forces had no experience with guerrilla tactics. Every time they responded to an attack, the humans were already gone. Every time they reinforced an area, the attacks moved elsewhere. Trade routes became dangerous. Merchant ships refused to travel without heavy escorts. Colonies that had never seen conflict suddenly experienced sabotage and raids. The Empire's economy, which depended on the smooth flow of resources across 847 worlds, began to strain. Emperor Thaxul XVI watched these developments with growing fury. He had expected the humans to collapse after the Battle of Sol. Instead, they were spreading chaos throughout his empire. His advisors recommended negotiation. He refused. The Empire did not negotiate with terrorists and insurgents. Send the full fleet to human space, he ordered. I want every human world burned to bedrock. I want their species erased from existence. No mercy, no survivors. His military commanders began assembling the largest fleet in Imperial history. 40,000 ships pulled from every corner of the Empire. It would take months to organize, but when it launched, nothing would survive. Webb learned about the fleet mobilization through his underground contacts. He sent an encrypted message back to human space, knowing it might be intercepted. The message was simple. They were running out of time. The Emperor had to die before the fleet departed, or humanity would die. The team accelerated their plans. They had been observing the Imperial Palace for weeks, mapping guard rotations, security protocols, and structural weaknesses. The palace was massive, with thousands of rooms and corridors. But the Emperor followed a routine. Every morning he walked from his private chambers to the throne room. That was their window. On the morning of the operation, Webb's team moved into position. They wore their maintenance uniforms, carrying tools and equipment that looked innocent, but were actually weapons and explosives. They had 15 minutes from when the Emperor left his chambers to when he reached the throne room. The security forces never noticed the maintenance workers. Why would they? The workers had been there for weeks, always in the background, always irrelevant. That was the advantage of being underestimated. The Emperor emerged from his chambers with his personal guard, 8 elite warriors who had trained their entire lives to protect him. They moved down a grand corridor lined with statues and artwork looted from conquered civilizations. The Emperor was discussing the upcoming fleet deployment with an advisor, confident in his fortress, untouchable in his power. Webb's team struck from 3 directions simultaneously. The first explosive took out the rear guard. The second sealed the corridor exits. The third disabled the communication systems. 12 humans in powered armor they had assembled piece by piece over weeks emerged from side passages. The elite guards reacted instantly, but they were trained for ceremonial combat and limited engagements. They had never faced soldiers who had learned to kill in the brutal colony wars, who had spent their entire lives preparing for violence. The fight was over in 90 seconds. All 8 guards died. The Emperor's advisor fled and was shot while running. Emperor Thaxul XVI stood alone in the corridor, surrounded by humans. He raised his ceremonial scepter, the same weapon he had used to kill Ambassador Chen. Webb shot it out of his hand. "You cannot do this," the Emperor said, his voice losing its commanding tone. "I am the Emperor. I rule 847 worlds." "You are nothing," Webb said. "Nothing." He simply activated a holographic projector. The image showed Ambassador Sarah Chen standing in the throne room, speaking with dignity about human independence. It showed her refusing to kneel. It showed the Emperor raising his scepter. It showed her death. Her name was Sarah Chen, Webb said quietly. "That is all you need to know." The Emperor tried to speak, to threaten, to negotiate. Webb shot him twice in the center of mass. The ruler of 847 worlds, the leader of an empire that had existed for 12,000 years, died on the floor of his own palace. Webb's team moved quickly. They uploaded the execution footage to every communication system in the palace. They broadcasted it across all galactic frequencies. Then they vanished into the lower levels of the palace, beginning their escape route. Half the team died getting off the throne world. But Webb and 5 others made it to a stolen ship. They jumped to human space, carrying with them proof that the impossible had been accomplished. The Emperor was dead, and the galaxy would never be the same. The news of Emperor Thaxel XVII's death spread through the galaxy in hours. The footage of his execution played on every news network, every communications channel, every public display. Species that had never heard of humanity suddenly knew them as the ones who killed the Emperor. The Velkari Empire descended into immediate chaos. The Imperial Council, a body that had not made meaningful decisions in generations, suddenly found itself trying to hold together 847 worlds with no clear leadership. Regional governors declared independence. Subject species saw weakness and began their own rebellions. The massive fleet being assembled for humanity's destruction dissolved as ships were recalled to deal with local crises. In the Imperial Palace, the remaining leadership met in emergency session. The throne room where Ambassador Chen had died, where countless species had bent their knees for millennia, was now empty and cold. The new acting emperor, Thaxel XVII's nephew, was a bureaucrat with no military experience and no respect from the military commanders. "We must retaliate," one admiral insisted. "We must show the galaxy that killing an emperor has consequences. We must destroy the humans completely." "With what?" another commander replied bitterly. "Half our fleet is dealing with rebellions in the outer territories. A quarter is engaged in suppressing uprisings on subject worlds. The remainder is not enough to guarantee victory against an enemy that has already proven they can hurt us." The debate raged for days. Some called for total war. Others urged caution. A few, the more pragmatic ones, suggested something that would have been unthinkable weeks before. They suggested negotiation. On Earth, humanity watched the Imperial collapse with grim satisfaction. The casualty reports were still coming in from the Battle of Sol. Over 100,000 humans had died in the fighting. Millions more had lost homes, families, and livelihoods. Mars was still recovering from battle damage. The orbital infrastructure around Earth would take decades to fully rebuild. General Okonkwo sat in her temporary headquarters, watching the intelligence reports stream in. The Empire was fracturing. Species that had been subjugated for centuries were breaking free. The Velkari fleet, once an unstoppable force, was scattered and defensive. "We could push our advantage," and her chief of staff suggested. "Launch more raids, support the rebellions, watch the Empire tear itself apart." Okonkwo considered it. Part of her wanted to see the Empire burn completely, to make them pay for every human death, for Ambassador Chen, for all the species they had conquered and oppressed. But another part of her, the part that had seen too much war and too much death, was tired. "Contact Commander Webb," she ordered. "I want him and his surviving team back home. They have done enough." Webb's team was still making their way through Imperial space, moving carefully through systems that were increasingly unstable. They traveled in a stolen merchant vessel, using forged documents and sheer audacity to pass through security checkpoints. When they finally reached human space, they were greeted as heroes, but Webb did not feel like a hero. He felt like a soldier who had done what was necessary. He had killed the Emperor not for glory or revenge, but because it was the only way to save his species. Ambassador Chen's recorded message had stayed with him through the entire mission. Her dignity, her courage, her commitment to human independence. She had died for principles. He had killed for survival. The Velkari Empire sent a message to the United Earth Coalition 3 weeks after the Emperor's death. It was not a threat or demand. It was a request for ceasefire negotiations. The acting emperor, recognizing reality, offered to recognize human sovereignty in exchange for an end to human operations in imperial space. The negotiation took place on a neutral station, mediated by an independent species that had no allegiance to either side. General Okonkwo represented humanity. The Velkari sent their highest-ranking diplomat, not a military commander. That choice spoke volumes. The resulting treaty was simple. The Velkari Empire acknowledged humanity as a sovereign civilization, with all rights and privileges. Humanity agreed to cease military operations against imperial targets and to not support rebellions within imperial space. Both sides exchanged prisoners and war dead. Reparations were discussed but ultimately abandoned, as the Empire was in no position to pay and humanity had no interest in prolonging the conflict. "This is not victory," Okonkwo told the human delegation. "This is survival. We hurt them badly enough that they respect us now. That is all we needed." The treaty was signed on the anniversary of Ambassador Chen's death. Her family was present at the ceremony. Her daughter, now 15 years old, stood beside Okonkwo as the final documents were sealed. She had been 13 when her mother left for the diplomatic mission. She had grown up in a galaxy at war, watching her mother become a symbol of human resistance. Was it worth it? The girl asked Okonkwo quietly. All the death, all the destruction. Was it worth it to prove we would not kneel? Okonkwo looked at the young woman for a long moment. It was a question she had asked herself many times. Over 150,000 humans had died in the war. Countless aliens had died in the rebellions that followed the Emperor's assassination. The galaxy had been destabilized in ways that would take generations to resolve. Your mother believed humanity had to stand on its own terms, Okonkwo said finally. She believed freedom was worth fighting for. She was right. If we had submitted, we would have been subjects forever. Now we are equals. We paid a terrible price for it, but we paid it willingly. That is what makes us human. The galaxy slowly stabilized over the following years. The Velkari Empire contracted, losing control of dozens of worlds as subject species gained independence or autonomy. New civilizations emerged, no longer content to accept domination by the powerful. The old order, where strength alone determined hierarchy, began to change. Humanity expanded carefully, establishing new colonies and trade relationships with species that had previously ignored them. They were no longer newcomers or primitives. They were the civilization that had challenged an empire and won. Other species approached them with respect, sometimes with fear, but always with acknowledgement. The United Earth Coalition established a memorial on the moon, near the railgun batteries that had helped defend Earth. It was a simple monument, a black stone wall inscribed with the names of every human who had died in the war. At the center was a statue of Ambassador Sarah Chen, standing tall, facing toward the stars. The inscription beneath her statue was brief. She refused to kneel. They paid the price. Commander Marcus Webb attended the dedication ceremony but did not speak. He stood in the back, watching as dignitaries gave speeches about courage and sacrifice. He thought about the Emperor dying in that corridor, about the guards they had killed, about the half of his team that never made it home. He thought about whether they had done the right thing. A young reporter approached him after the ceremony, asking for an interview about the mission. Webb politely declined. Some stories did not need to be told. Some actions spoke for themselves. 5 years after Ambassador Chen's death, humanity hosted the first Galactic Independence Summit. 37 species attended, all of them former subjects of various empires who had gained their freedom in the chaos following the Emperor's assassination. They gathered to discuss mutual defense, trade agreements, and the principle that no civilization should be forced to submit to another. General Okonkwo, now retired, attended as an observer. She watched these species, many of whom had been enslaved for centuries, discuss their futures as free peoples. She saw the hope in their representatives, the determination to build something better than the old empires. "Your war changed everything," one delegate told her. "When we saw humans refuse to submit, when we saw what you did to the Emperor, we realized we could be free too. You gave us hope." Okonkwo accepted the thanks but felt conflicted. Humanity had not fought to free the galaxy. They had fought to save themselves. But the consequences had been larger than anyone anticipated. Sometimes, she reflected, the most important revolutions are the ones that happen accidentally. The Velkari Empire still existed, diminished but stable. They had adapted to their reduced circumstances, focusing on internal development rather than expansion. The new emperor, chosen by council rather than hereditary succession, had begun reforms that would have been unthinkable under his predecessor. The old ways were dying, slowly but inevitably. On Earth, in schools across human space, children learned about Ambassador Sarah Chen. They learned about her courage, her principles, and her death. They learned about the war that followed, about the humans who fought and died to preserve their freedom. But they also learned about the cost of that freedom, about the responsibility that came with independence. Sarah Chen's daughter grew up and became a diplomat herself, following her mother's path. She worked to build bridges between species, to create institutions that would prevent future conflicts. She carried her mother's memory with her, a reminder of what happens when diplomacy fails and what it takes to restore it. Commander Webb never spoke publicly about the mission that killed the Emperor. He lived quietly, working as a training instructor for Special Forces units, but every year on the anniversary of Ambassador Chen's death, he visited the memorial on the moon.